can a state's terms of business include a requirement not to boycott Israel? The 8th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled last week that they can. The court says Arkansas can refuse to do business with companies that won't sign a pledge guaranteeing that they won't boycott Israel. The Arkansas Times challenged the law with the support of the ACLU, saying that requirement is unconstitutional compelled speech. But the court says this time it's not about free speech. Anti-Israel boycotts are part of the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement, also known as BDS. It promotes boycotts, divestments, and economic sanctions against Israel. To understand more about the court's reasoning, yesterday I spoke with senior counsel at the Lawfare Project, G'Rard Filidi. G'Rard, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the U.S. Court of Appeals has ruled in favor of the state of Arkansas, saying that it can require that businesses that do business with it do not boycott Israel. Could you explain some of the court's reasoning here?
Well, sure. The court's reasoning, and first of all, this is a very important decision. It comes from the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. It's the highest court that has considered this issue. So this is really a seminal case on the issue of anti-BDS laws. And the court's reasoning is that anti-BDS laws do not affect speech. They do not implicate the First Amendment. They regulate conduct, which is, in this case, discriminatory conduct targeting Israel and the Jewish people, and it's not speech. So the First Amendment protections do not apply.
Justice Jane Kelly wrote in dissent that supporting or promoting boycotts of Israel is constitutionally protected, and the Arkansas Times says it is a matter of free speech.
Well, I think it's an interesting argument, and it's easy to argue that anything is speech. Unfortunately, it's not. We have seen that speech is not the same as conduct. And this justice misplaces reliance on the argument that engaging in expressive conduct is somehow protected. But that's not the case here. We're not talking about limiting the ability of the Arkansas Times or anyone else to make statements that it wants to about BDS. What we're talking about is limiting conduct, engaging in BDS, which is discriminatory. So the justice is misapplying reasoning in the dissenting opinion.
How common are these laws, such as what the state of Arkansas has about not boycotting Israel?
Well, anti-BDS laws are prevalent in about 30 states. They're on the agenda for additional state legislatures as well. So this is a growing groundswell of state legislatures that are stepping in to say that this is discriminatory and unacceptable targeted discrimination. What BDS is national origin discrimination. What it is, it has the effect of discriminating against the Jewish people. So this is why legislatures are stepping in to protect the rule of law and to disallow discrimination through commercial action. And we see this in 30 states, and we're seeing an increased groundswell of support to have this as federal legislation as well.
The movement to boycott Israel has been called by some critics illegal commercial discrimination and racism. Could you explain a little more about how it's different to other forms of boycotting?
Well, here it's worth noting that the boycott targeting Israel is unlike any other boycott. We simply don't have these kinds of boycotts against a whole country or against a whole group of people. That's not something that we see. We see Israel and Jews singled out for criticism and disparate treatment based on identity. And that is the main reason how this differentiates from other types of boycotts. The important part to note as well is the effect of BDS. The effect of BDS is it has for years created hostility in a hostile environment targeting Jews on college campuses, in the workplace, and even on the streets. We see this with protests in New York City that target Jews for attack, all under the guise of BDS and supporting and advocating for discrimination.
Now, you've said that this case is a significant case. What do you think should happen next?
I think that what should happen is more states should be emboldened to pass anti-BDS legislation and to enforce it. Seeing this decision gives them good support and legal analysis for why anti-BDS legislation is constitutional, why it doesn't violate the First Amendment, and why it is essential to safeguarding the civil rights of the Jewish people. So I expect to see more states passing this kind of legislation and more states arguing successfully in favor of enforcing it.
G'Rard Filidi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.